Well, and a gracious hello to everyone. I am Mike Hingson, your host for Unstoppable Mindset. And today we get to chat with Maria Gallucci. And Maria is a realtor in Colorado. But there's a whole lot more to Maria than just being a realtor and selling houses. She had deaf parents, so she is very actively involved in making real estate available for deaf and hard of hearing people. And she does some other kinds of things, and I'm sure we're going to get into all of that. So I'm not going to give it away. Where would the fun be in that? Maria, I want to welcome you to Unstoppable Mindset. We're really glad that you're here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be on here.
Well, it's my pleasure as well. Well, why don't you start by telling us kind of maybe about the early Maria growing up and all that. It's always fun to start at the beginning, right?
Yeah, so I felt I'm fluent in ASL. ASL was my first language, and there's 6 of us kids, and we were all hearing. So it felt completely normal to me as a kid because it was my world that I've always known. And so I feel like growing up, the home was filled with more visual expression, communication, and there was so much depth and presence on how we connected as a family because we were raised with deaf parents. And then we went to like speech therapy, and my mom always said we learned how to talk through the TV and just going to school.
Because you really didn't get the right speech kinds of things, if you will, just from your parents alone.
Yeah, correct. Because ASL was our first language, so we didn't know because they couldn't speak, so we didn't know how to communicate other than
through ASL, which makes sense.
Yeah,
so
through ASL.
So they didn't speak at all.
Have a puppy. No, they did not. So my mom is trying to attack everything. My mom was 9 months when she became deaf. She had the measles and the chickenpox, I think, at the same time. So she was not 9 months, but my dad was born deaf. So my mom was more verbal, but my dad was not verbal at all.
Mm-hmm. But she wasn't overly verbal because 9 months, yeah, that's not a lot.
Yeah, exactly. She was a baby, so she didn't really know any different than being deaf.
So how was that growing up for you and your siblings? You clearly had parents who were, if you will, different. Did that make any difference to you guys, or did that ever get sort of addressed in any way with all of your colleagues at school or anything like that?
I think when I just remember going to the zoo, and we were on a kindergarten field trip, and I remember my friend and I sitting underneath the tree, and my mom was coming up, so I was signing to her across the parking lot because you can communicate that way.
Yeah.
And my friend's like, "Oh, your mom doesn't hear you. You communicate with your hands." I'm like, "Yeah, but that's how we've always been." So for me, being younger than that, it was my normal. But then when I realized everyone thought that we were different, but it's okay to be different, I think that's when I realized that, our normal isn't our normal that I thought it was. But it's our normal.
What year was that? When were you in kindergarten?
It was in the 80s because I remember the tornado.
Yeah. Did you encounter much bullying because of any of that?
Yes, we were always made fun of or being bullied all the time and that's why I kind of wanted to write the book because I wanted people to know that it's okay to be different and not all of us are perfect. And I think being made fun of growing up all the time, and even now to this day, people still stare or make comments. So it was. We definitely got bullied.
The reason I asked the question was that I grew up and growing up in the 50s and the 60s, I didn't get much bullying. I'm sure there were lots of stares. There were occasionally times that I was treated differently simply because I was blind, but mostly I didn't really encounter it. I think it has become more of an issue with people, especially now with social media. There's just a whole lot more bullying than there used to be. But I think I was pretty blessed, and my parents also were very supportive. So of course they were seeing, but when the doctors told them that I should be sent off to a home because no blind child could ever grow up to do anything, my parents said, of course he can grow up to do whatever he wants. And
Yeah,
so they were very supportive all the way down the line.
Yeah, and I think that that's how it should be with the deaf and hard of hearing community,
Sure.
especially with the kids, because not all deaf parents know sign language, so it makes the kids feel more isolated.
Yeah.
And now we have schools where they can go to be with everybody, but then when they go home, they feel isolated because they don't have that.
Yeah.
The dynamic of a group.
What about the whole, I don't know whether it's really as much of a controversy now as maybe it used to be, but the whole issue of sign language as opposed to reading lips?
That's actually a myth. That's one thing that I think a lot of people assume, that all deaf and hard of hearing people can read lips, and that's actually not the case.
Right. Yeah. That I understand.
I can, because I was taught that.
Yeah.
And so it's an acquired thing that you learn as being able to read lips.
It seems to me a few years ago there was a superintendent at Gallaudet, and he was a lip reader, but I guess he wasn't totally deaf, and there was a lot of discomfort. Well, discomfort's probably a polite word. There was a lot of anger about him, and I guess he didn't last too long, but that was why I asked the question. It just seems to me that however you communicate, it doesn't really matter which one works as long as it works for you.
Yeah, exactly. As long as you're comfortable and feel like that's how you can communicate. And I think that's how being different, it's okay, because everybody's different in their own way. And it's okay for one person to learn one way and another person to learn another way.
Yeah, as long as you can communicate.
Mm-hmm.
And that's
exactly
really the big issue.
Yeah, I think so too. I think while like the story's rooted in the deaf culture, it's like its heart is about something being universal, about how we connect and how we're present for each other.
That hasn't worked for anybody else, so I don't know why it would necessarily be true for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. I really am, and I've been a very strong proponent of this in the blindness community, because we're always called blind or visually impaired. And blind people are starting to recognize that that's a problem, because we're not impaired, and visually we're not really different either. That's something that the professionals created. But slowly people are learning about blind and low vision as opposed to blind and visually impaired. And deaf people, sometime before, all recognized the problem with the whole concept of hearing impaired. Because why should you be equated with someone who can hear when you don't, whoever you are?
Exactly. And I think that I never use impaired as a word, because I do think that it's derogatory in my own opinion. And I feel like that's where the deaf gain comes in, because they have other senses that come in. So it's not because they lost something, they also gained something.
Yep. And that's just as true if you're blind. If you develop the senses. And of course, it isn't an automatic thing, but you have to work at it. But as long as you develop the senses, then you gain things that other people don't have. I wrote an article a couple of years ago actually about disabilities, and pointed out that every single person on the planet has a disability. For most people, you're light dependent and you don't do well without light. And so the fact of the matter is everyone has a disability of some sort.
Yeah, exactly. And I 100% agree with that. And that's where it comes in, of just being empathetic towards others and just having awareness of not everyone is the same, and all of us are unique in our own ways.
That's right. Every single person is unique in their own ways, and every single person in some ways or another is alike. And we need to really stop trying to treat people differently just because they don't necessarily do things the same way we do.
Yeah, because they're not in what you think is your circle and what you think is your normal. Just because we're outside of the box or people are outside the box doesn't mean that we have to be mean to them or judge them or bully them. Right.
So where did you go to college?
So I went to in Colorado. So I'm from New Hampshire. I was born in New Hampshire, but I moved out here when I was 5. And so I am a teen mom. So I had to get a job right away. So that's how I got into real estate right away. So every time Jordan turns a year older, I know that that's how long I've been in real estate. So it'll actually be 30. Oh, this month will be 34 years.
Jordan is 34, huh?
Yeah, she'll turn 34 at the end of December.
Well, there you go. What prompted your parents to move to Colorado?
I think my mom said that she didn't really like the humidity
Okay.
in the East Coast. And so when we were little, it was just my brother, BJ, my sister, and I. And she just picked us up one day and she said she just drove across the United States looking for a place to land. And she loved the mountains and loved Colorado.
And your dad?
Yeah, he came with him. With her.
He decided wherever she wanted to go was okay with him.
Yeah, wherever she wanted to go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because we're the only family in Colorado, so it's our immediate family. And then obviously now we have like nieces and nephews, but we were never raised with like cousins, grandparents, or aunts or uncles. They were all back east. So we drive in our van 3 times a year, 3-day trip from Colorado to New Hampshire, and with 6 kids and 2 deaf parents. So that was very loud.
Yeah, I'll bet it was. And your parents put up with you.
Yep. I always told them, I'm like, the only reason why you had 6 kids is because you're both deaf.
That's it. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, exactly.
So what prompted you to, I guess it was, you were in college or you had graduated when you started real estate or how did that work?
Yeah, I was still in high school. I started as,
in high school.
So I started as like a processor, an assistant. And then when I was able to get my license, I did. And so because I needed to support Jordan any way that I could, because I was a teen mom. And so I remember helping my parents when they were, or when I was younger with real estate and mortgages. And I always liked that aspect of things. And so I got into it and never got out. I've always been in it.
Did you do college?
Yes, I did. Yeah. So I was a teen mom. I did college and real estate school. I actually have my employee broker's license. And so I have the highest one. And then I also I do like all of the stuff on that side because it helps the deaf and hard of hearing community.
So where did you go to college?
My dog is being crazy. I'm University of Colorado in Denver, though.
In Denver, okay.
Yeah.
What is your dog doing?
Crazy. I don't know. He's a puppy, so he's like being crazy.
Well, I close my door when I do. I close the door when I do the podcast because
I did, and he broke through the door. Or he didn't break through it, but he's just a little pug. But he opened the door on his own. Now he must have learned how to do it.
Well, we have a cat. Well, I have a cat now, and she likes to be petted while she eats, and it doesn't matter when it is or what's going on. She has to be petted while she eats. So I always close the door when I do the podcast, so she's stuck on the outside.
Yeah, I need to make sure I secure that next time.
A couple of times, she was in here when I started a podcast, sleeping on the back of my desk chair, and she stayed there. So we had a cat monitor for the whole time, but typically it's not for that reason that she's in here.
Yeah, I have 2 rag dolls. They're so cute.
Oh yeah, she's a small one, but she's a Maine Coon. She's a cutie.
Oh yeah, my son has a Maine Coon. He has an orange one, and he just got it. And he thought Raw was going to be bigger than he was, but he's not like one of the huge ones. He's a little bit on the smaller side. Yeah,
this one, Stitch weighs about 10, 11 pounds. So.
Oh, okay, yeah, I think Raw's probably 20, which is on the smaller, probably 18. The
smaller side, yeah.
Yeah.
But she's a cutie, and she's been, for me, a great help ever since my wife passed. We were married 40 years, and being in a wheelchair, the body just slows down, and it did. But Stitch sleeps on top of me at night now, so...
How cute. Yeah, my mom and dad were married for 32 before she passed.
Ah. Now, is your dad still with you?
No, yesterday was his 3-year anniversary.
Oh, gosh.
Of living, yeah. So they actually coincidentally died of the same cancer. But my dad did remarry to Dixie, and they were married for over 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that works out. And then she was hearing, or was she deaf?
She's deaf as well. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, and she was actually not born deaf either. She became deaf, I think she was young as well, probably 9 months, and from an antibiotic.
Oh, gosh.
And that's how she became deaf.
So why did you, so I was going to ask why you ended up going into real estate, but obviously you liked, your parents were in real estate?
No, but I helped them because there was no interpreters back then. And so I was like, fell into the role of the family interpreter, all of us did. And then so we went to, I was like 12 years old, and we went to go close on one of their houses. And there was no, I could tell that they were confused on the paperwork, and there was no interpreter there. And so I jumped in to help them. And so they would understand what they were signing. And that's why I was always just such a huge advocate for the community and for anybody who feels like an outcast, because I think that people just want to be like, just feel
what kind of work
they understand.
What kind of work did your parents do?
So my dad was a mechanic, and then my mom was basically a stay-at-home mom.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, my dad was a mechanic he retired as a mechanic.
Wow.
Yeah, so we always got our cars fixed.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing. So was it an advantage since he didn't hear, he could focus, or did he get distracted like most people do easily?
I think it was an advantage because he could focus, because he wouldn't be paying attention with all the noise and the ruckus around him, especially being a mechanic. Yeah.
I loved when I worked for a company that hired me out here in California to sell to the East Coast. I loved being the first person in the morning. So I was in by 6 a.m. California time. And most other people arrived. Well, a couple of people who also sold to the East and Midwest arrived at like 6:30 to 7. Most people arrived around 8. But I got so much more done in the morning before anybody arrived to interrupt. So that's why I asked the question. I appreciate the value of being able to focus.
Oh, no, I love that too. I get up early in the morning because even if it's like 6 or 5 or 4 in the morning, it's so calming when there's like, you're able to like concentrate and do everything without all the distractions. I do that now. I don't know if it was because I was raised in that type of community, but for sure I do the same thing.
Well, the other thing that wakes me up in the morning these days is a cat who wants to be petted while she eats, like she did at 3 this morning. So
it is so cute.
I told her, though, she can only do that once a night, because if she tries to double dip, I will ignore her the second time.
Yeah, exactly.
Mostly that's worked out pretty well. Well, so specifically, you helped with the closing of the house, and that just really attracted you to dealing with numbers and some of the things that went on that eventually got you into real estate?
Yes, and I love showing people houses and being able to give value in your opinions on like how you should stage it for a sale, or how you need a deaf-friendly house. So I think for me, it was, I love seeing people's faces when you actually are like closing on the home, or for them, that's their first home and they're so happy, or that they sell a home. So for me, it was more of a heart feeling, because I just love it. And I've loved it ever since.
What is being a real estate agent and selling real estate? What has that taught you?
Because I grew up with the deaf and hard of hearing community, it's taught me empathy and patience, and I think that it helps me communicate with them better, because you can tell that they're so grateful that I know that I'm fluent in ASL, and for them to communicate with somebody, it makes them feel more connected, and I think they trust better that way.
Mm-hmm. You also do, I gather, some stuff with LGBTQ.
Yes, my son is gay.
I was going to ask what the connection had to be. Okay.
Yeah, so he came out when he was 12, and I think because I was already very connected and compassionate, because I saw my parents getting made fun of, or I saw us getting made fun of growing up, it didn't even faze me whatsoever. I was like, okay, well, what do you need? I'm here for you.
Yeah. Well, again, everybody's different, and also everybody is very similar, and we need to allow that.
Yeah, and I think that love is love, no matter who you are or what you are, and how different you are. So I think just having compassion and letting people be their authentic self is very important.
Right. Well, and I think there's a lot of merit to that. So for you, When did you write your book, Raised in Silence?
So it was 15 years in the making, and every year I had it on my New Year's resolution list. And finally, like this year, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to have to do it, because if I don't just finish it, like it's going to be on my New Year's resolution list every year, and I'll just never get done. So I had updated my phone, and I had seen some notes that I had from like 2007, from long time ago, and that was just this year. So then I just started going full train this year in January, and then it was just released a month or two ago. And I already got on the. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Oh, and then I was Amazon's bestseller on that list, and also top new release.
Did you self-publish, or did you have a publisher that published it?
I had a publisher. It's both. I think it's half and half, because the publishers helped edit everything and finish it and help me publish. But I think it's both of them.
Yeah. Well, you get to do a lot of the marketing of it.
Yes.
That makes it fun. It's changed a little bit because of social media and so on. When Thunderdog, my first book, was published, the publisher had done a fair amount of marketing in a variety of different ways. But when we wrote my last book, Live Like a Guide Dog, that was published last August of 2024, even though it was published by a traditional publisher, we were responsible for doing a lot more of the marketing of the book. But that's okay.
Yeah, that's how ours is too. Like we're more responsible for that side of everything.
Yeah. Well, how did you come up with the title Raised in Silence? I can imagine, but I want to hear you say it.
So I was just so at first I actually wanted it to be growing up in silence. And so that's what I had like in my notes, and everything was growing up in silence. And then I thought, well, we were also raised in silence. So
yeah.
I think that the communication aspect of it, because obviously it wasn't silent in our house because we were all loud, but it's still like silence towards like my parents and things like that. So that's why I picked Raised in Silence.
I think it's a great title. I actually like it better than Growing Up in Silence.
Oh, thank you. I was struggling with that when the editors were like, I think we need to do Raised in Silence. And then after I was thinking about it, I was like, okay, yeah, it does make sense. So now I'm so glad that we ended up sticking to that one.
When I wrote my first book, and I had a colleague who wrote it with me, Susie Flory, I wanted to call it Forward because that's the first basic command that you give a guide dog. But the editor said, no, we really don't like that. We want to call it Thunderdog. And that had to grow on me, but they clearly had some merit to their thinking, because Thunderdog ended up being a #1 New York Times bestseller. And again, I think it helps to teach as much as anything else. So it's a lot more than just talking about the World Trade Center. It's teaching about blindness, and hopefully people learn some things from it even today.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that I like the title, but I know how you feel, because that's how I felt too. I struggled for the longest time trying to switch the name, but I'm so glad that I ended up doing that. I mean, I think sometimes the editors know more than, well, they obviously know more than I do, but
sometimes they really know what they're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why they get paid the big bucks. So they might not say they get paid the big bucks, but nevertheless. But that's cool. Well, what prompted you to actually write the book, and when did you decide or really realize that you had to share your story?
Growing up, I've always felt like I needed to share my story, because I wanted to be an advocate for anybody who felt different. And like my parents felt different. We felt it different being codas. And I think that I wanted to honor my parents and honor the deaf culture, and like it's my little love letter to the deaf community. And it's not just about the deaf community. It's about anybody who wants to feel like heard and just be able to be accepted. Mm-hmm.
What does CODA mean, actually?
Child of Deaf Adults.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't see the movie a few years ago. I've not really been much of a moviegoer as much as I like to, but especially now that my wife has died, I don't go. But when they come on TV, sometimes I'll watch them.
Yeah, I don't think I've really really gone to a movie theater since 2020, actually, now that I think of it, because now, like, we got spoiled during 2020 when we were able to just to watch it on our TV instead of having to leave and go out.
Yeah. Well, I think the last movie I went to was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Doom, or Dial of Destiny. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was what, 2 or 3 years ago?
I love Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
I don't think I've seen that one. I'll have to watch that one.
Oh, you should.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have to remember that.
It's a traditional, perfect, good indie movie.
Yeah. I love that growing up. That was one of my favorite.
Well, so you've written this book, and you've told the story, and obviously people relate because, as you said, it's the #1 Amazon bestseller, so that's pretty cool. But how did you tell me about the cover art? I know there's obviously cover art, but for those of us who don't see it, what's the cover art, and what prompted you to go the way you did?
So that is actually my son in the picture, and so he designed the cover, and it says deaf in sign language. So it's from a finger to your ear and a finger to your lip. So it says deaf, and the dark side is the hearing world, and just the world who doesn't understand any like sort of differences, and the bright side is the deaf culture with the color, or there's a pink rose on the ear, and that just shows the vibrancy of the deaf culture. So it's just to show the difference between basically night and day, and just to have people understand that there's things just beyond people.
Yeah.
And differences.
Well, and there are always ways to communicate. I've known a number of deaf people, and we've always figured a way to communicate. Many times I know they've read lips, but I don't sign, but I've always gotten help when there was a need to communicate. I remember there was a story, a past treasurer who's now died of the National Federation of the Blind, a guy named Dick Edlund, lived in Kansas and owned a hardware store. And one day he was working at the store, and somebody came in, and Dick asked, "Can I help you?" And nobody said anything or whatever. I don't know how long it went on, but somebody finally came over and said, "He's signing. He can't hear you." And so there you got a real failure to communicate. I don't know whether Dick ever explained what they. Oh, I guess somebody did interpret and helped figure out how to deal with the two of them, but
how to communicate. Yeah. Dad. Yeah, exactly. My dad had a deaf and blind friend. And so he was a really good friend for my dad. And we would always sign in their hands is how they knew what we were saying. We would sign in their hands. I still remember that to say. I actually had a client who was deaf and blind as well. And that's how I already knew how to communicate with them because my dad had a friend. And so it was easy for us to get along, and it just makes such a big difference in their world if they can understand what you're saying and how you're communicating.
And now there are newer technologies that come along to help with all that too, which is, of course, something that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, technology's come a long way since I was a child. Like it's so much better now, because now we have like the video phones where you can actually have somebody there interpreting what the other person's saying over the phone, which we didn't have back then. We had a TTY, which was like a little computer thing that would just send it off to the other phone.
But now there are also, I've been seeing ads on TV for people, especially for seniors who are losing hearing, and the phone will actually display what the other person is saying because it's doing voice recognition. Yeah,
that's I think we still have ways to go with technology, but the technology now is just insane. Like it's so much better than it was.
Yeah,
because there's a lot, and I think that's why my motto is just try. Because if people are just trying with them, and even though you can't speak their language, if you're trying to use your phone or your app or a note thing just to show them what you're trying to say, I think that just makes a huge difference in their world.
The only problem with just try is that competes with Yoda, who always said, "Do or do not. There is no try."
Yeah, that's true.
Oh, gosh. Always something, isn't there? Well,
I know it is.
Yoda would have figured it out. It's no problem. But no, I hear what you're saying, and that makes a lot of sense. But it is so difficult sometimes to communicate. Mostly, though, I think in the world we live in, the failure to communicate is really and I hate to put it quite this way, but the failure to listen or observe might be a better way to put it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that if we're present and they feel like you're trying to communicate with them and just try with your whole heart, then I think that makes anybody feel really well.
When we moved to California, when we moved back to California after September 11th, we were looking for a home, and this one realtor ended up not being the person that we used, but we met him, and he showed us 4 houses. And after the first one, Karen said, "This is why this house won't work for us from a wheelchair standpoint, because there's no room to build a ramp." And he showed us 3 other houses that basically had the same floor plan. And clearly there was no way to modify easily any of those houses, but he just kept showing us the same kind of house, which just got very frustrating after a while.
Yeah, no, I completely understand. I've had a few clients that were in a wheelchair, and that's another thing with the deaf and hard of hearing community, why they feel more comfortable, I think, because I know that you need a deaf-friendly house. So I'm not going to be showing them houses that are cookie cutters, because it has to be open to where they could talk from the kitchen to the living room.
Right. And
especially with the ADA, with the wheelchair, I never showed any houses that I already knew didn't have that in there.
We loved great rooms. And so when we built a house, we built a manufactured home when we lived in Vista, California, so that's down in the San Diego area. Even that one was very open. Then when we moved to New Jersey, we were a little bit locked into what we had to construct for a home because of where we had to build it and the only floor plans they allowed. But even there, it was fairly open. But this house is extremely open. There's a combination family room, dining room, and then there's a long island and then the kitchen on the other side, which is really cool.
Yeah, and I think even for me, because I was raised in that culture and that community, for me, I have to have an open house as well, because that's how I was raised. And it's so much easier and so much better for communicating, even if you're not deaf or hard of hearing, like just to be able just to have like an open house. It's always been, I always tell everybody you have to have your 3 musts, and that was one of mine.
Yeah, well, and I think it makes a lot of sense. And occasionally my guide dog and I would chase each other around the island in the middle.
Yeah, exactly. See, that's what you need. My island is in the middle too.
It's a pretty long island. It's like about 15 feet long. But but he loves it. He chases me or I chase him, and we enjoy it. Yeah, having an open room makes a lot of sense.
Makes a big and it helps with communication and just being inclusive, I think.
And it helps even with heating and all that, because you're not separating a whole bunch of things off by walls and all that, and it just tends to work pretty well.
Yeah, and I feel like a lot of people, if they get a house that is kind of like cut up, they always blow out the walls to make it open. So I feel like people prefer an open floor plan than they do the closed.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of merit to that. So in your book, do you have a favorite chapter?
I think my favorite, my favorite chapter would be chapter 7, because it has to do with my son and him coming out. So it has to do a lot with being inclusive and just being loving and having empathy towards other people, and always putting yourself in their shoes and just bridging the gaps between like communication gaps or even just bullying. Yeah. So chapter 7 for sure.
And the rest of your family is, I would assume, quite happy with your son as well?
Yes. Yep. There was not even a tick or anything at all. They were all very accepting and very loving about it.
Of course, Mom is of the opinion that when this child gets to be old enough, he can support her in the manner she wants to become accustomed to, right?
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, okay. Oh, we'll see.
Makes the wheels go around.
Yeah. So what do you want people to take away from the book, Raised in Silence? What do you want them to learn and take away from it?
I think the simplest but most powerful thing is just to slow down and be fully present for anybody. And I think it's about connection and being able to bridge like worlds and bridge communities, and just being accepting and inclusive, and not letting anybody feel like they're outsiders. So to me, my hope is that I believe have the world be more inclusive, compassionate, and connected.
Have you encountered some people who just won't go there and just deny that and tend to not want to be inclusive?
Yes, especially with my son, because people like in school were throwing stones at him. And I think that a lot of people feel like if it's not their world, that you don't like, I don't need you, or you don't need that. But what I think a lot of people who have mindset like that don't realize that someday you're going to need somebody.
Yep.
So how would you felt if you made that to their, and you don't have to be perfect. You just have to show up and just try for them. I think that's where the magic happens.
Yeah. Well, empathy never hurts.
Exactly. It takes a lot more or less facial muscles to smile and be nice than it does to be mean.
Yeah, I think what I heard was it takes 3 muscles to smile and 17 to frown. I don't know if that's true, but it sounds like it to me.
Yeah, exactly. If it's not, it's going to be a new thing.
Yeah. Well, I love to help make people smile. I know every time I travel through the airport when I'm going to or coming from a speaking engagement, one of the things that I've decided is my mission in life is to make the TSA people laugh, because they have such a thankless job, And
I know, and I think I agree with that. And every time I'm out in public or I'm with everybody, I always give people compliments. I say hi to them. If I can see that they're struggling, I'll come up to them. So I think being raised the way I was has taught me empathy, resilience, and how to really show up for people, and that you don't know what happened that day. Like you don't know what happened to them. So why not just make an effort and just be kind?
Well, it started for me during COVID when I really started doing it a lot, because we had masks on, and I'd go up to when we started to travel again, although COVID was still around and people were told or asked to mask, I had the mask on, and I'd go up to the TSA kiosk and they say, I need to see your ID. And I say, well, I'll give it to you, but what good is it going to do you? Well, he says, I got to see that you're who you say you are. And I said, how are you going to do that? I got a mask on. He said, oh, you got to take it off. And I said, well, no, they said to have a mask on. And they laugh. But now when I go through airports and they say, I need your ID, I say, what'd you do, lose yours?
Oh, that's a good one. I like that one.
Yeah, it's fun. But I think
I love that.
My favorite, and it was a COVID one, we were, I had to go to the bank, and my wife, Karen, drove me down, but she stayed in the car because she wanted to stay as isolated as possible, just on principle of she knew that there were a lot of ways that her immune system might not be as strong as others because of being in a chair her whole life and all that. So I go into the bank. I'm wearing a mask. I got my white cane with me, because I didn't use the dog just to go into the bank. And I went up to the counter and I had this bright flash. And when they said, hi, can I help you? I said, sure, but I have a question for you first. I said, isn't it strange that today someone in a mask can walk into a bank, come up to the teller, and then I lifted my cane up and say, this is a stick up? Everyone loved it. I mean, the manager came over and he said, we have just not had anyone give us a laugh like that in a long time.
I know. And I think that's so important for all of us to, I think, feel, is just to feel like the happiness, like just to be like a happier human. I think that you just made their day, and then you feel good inside as well. And I think that's what, I think that's so important to learn these days.
Have you had much indication that your book is helping in sort of the broader sense of accessibility and inclusion?
Yes. In fact, I had a lot of people give me feedback that they were going to learn ASL, and then hearing people, and then they just never did. And then they said that now the book has inspired them to be able to show up for their employees or try to have interpreters there, or also to learn some basic signs so they can communicate. So I've had a lot of feedback like that people are actually going back to, like, it's inspired them to learn ASL.
Right. Well, which explains also the importance of, this is a book like others that really needs to be heard, felt, and experienced outside of the specific community that you're writing about. And it's really more for the rest of the world than it is for the CODA world. Exactly.
Yeah. It's not for the deaf and hard of hearing or the CODA. It's for everybody who wants to see communication differently. And that inclusion isn't about labels. It's about how we show up for one another in a job space and public and restaurants. So it's for all walks of life, not just that community. And I think my hopes was to tell story in the way that opens up hearts and helps people realize that connection is for everyone, not just communities.
Do you find that and I'm sure I know the answer, but do you find that there are a lot of people who are deaf who are discriminated against when it comes to employment and so on?
Yes, I have a lot of friends and clients in that community that feel like they are discriminated against. With my dad, they never had an interpreter at any of the meetings, like any of the HR meetings or any of the HR or sales meeting. And I think that's so isolating for them because they want to be a part of it too. So my hopes is that businesses will start realizing that this community is so underserved and we just need to show up for them.
Yeah, and that's why it's so frustrating to hear some of the derogatory things that we are interacting with or hearing these days about the whole issue of diversity, equity, and inclusion and all that. And I think diversity is such a misused term today anyway, because the reality is that disabilities have been left out of diversity, which is why whenever we have discussions about inclusion, I make it very clear that you're not inclusive unless you include people with disabilities.
Yeah, exactly. And I agree. I feel like that's been left out a lot, and it's just a very, very underserved community, especially with like the labels and stuff. So I definitely feel like they do get discriminated against, and it shouldn't be like that. We're all equals and we're all the same.
Are there any statistics that you're aware of as far as the unemployment rate among like employable deaf people?
Not that I know of, but I will definitely check that, but I haven't seen any.
Yeah, because I know for a while the unemployment rate, and we've seen it from several sources, the unemployment rate among employable blind people is in the 65 to 70% range. And it's, of course, not because we can't work, it's because people think we can't.
It's because people think you can't, and that's not true.
Right. It is not true at all.
We're all equals, and deaf, blind, hard of hearing, all that can do just as much and maybe even more because their senses are heightened than us or do anybody.
Well, and the reality is that as you said, technology has made such incredible strides, and it's continuing to do that. And the fact is that there are many jobs that were harder to do in the past that are much easier to do today because the technology exists that allows us access to the information that we need to do the jobs like other people have been able to.
Exactly. And I think that people don't, I think people are afraid of the unknown. So they don't really know what to do or what to do. But it's very easy to just find out what you need to do to be more inclusive and to have more access to things that we need.
What advice would you give to another CODA person as far as going forward in their life and things they have to deal with?
Utilize the skill, because ASL is a very emotional or like a emotional language. And I think that if we taught everybody and just be an advocate for all these communities, that we can change a lot of people's lives.
Yeah. And it's such a natural thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it makes you feel happy. Mm-hmm. Who wants to feel bad every day?
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Do you have a number of clients who are deaf or hard of hearing?
Yes, I would say 75 to 80% of my clients are deaf and hard of hearing, or from the LGBTQ plus community. I service all walks of life and all different clients, but I do specialize in that because I know the struggles that they've gone through, and I want them to feel like they have somebody that's on their side.
Do you also help other real estate agents who may encounter or find someone who comes in and who can't hear, or LGBTQ for that matter, and you assist them, or do you help with that way?
Yes, I do. So I have an ASL Realty referral network that's nationwide for anybody who's deaf out of Colorado, because I do Colorado and Florida. And so anybody who's deaf there, then I have a referral network for them. And then I'm also on the LGBTQ plus referral network as well, because I think that being able to stand up for them, both communities or in any communities, is such a gift, and it makes them feel like they're seen and heard.
Colorado and Florida, that's a pretty broad swath of territory. How did you do
Cold
that?
and hot.
Yeah, really.
There's I just loved Florida because I like the ocean and stuff, but I've always been in Colorado, so I ended up getting my license out there, and then to develop the ASL Realty to do the network part of it, so I can help everybody around the country.
Mm-hmm. Do you find that today, because of all the advances in technology and so on, that it's easier yet for, say, deaf and hard of hearing clients, or have we progressed enough that enough is integrated in that it's not quite as much of a challenge as it used to be?
I think that, now we have to have interpreters at all of the closings, which we didn't. I advocated for that.
Is that by law?
Yes, it's an ADA law.
It is under the ADA. Okay.
Yeah, it wasn't, but it is now.
Yeah.
And I think, or I feel like they appreciate somebody who knows their language and knows their culture, and they feel more connected. So I don't think, because I know AI right now is a huge thing, but I don't believe that that's going to take away from the ASL and the deaf and hard of hearing culture and world, because we have to be together. Like ours is more about connection than it is just typing or texting or whatever. Like we learn and we talk to each other by emotion. And so I feel like we're always going to be connected by seeing things. And so having the video relay service where you can actually see somebody on the other side is a huge plus.
Yeah, that helps a lot. So I'm assuming that you use the relay service a lot because you're obviously helping other people, and you can't be everywhere all the time to just be there to do it physically in person. Yeah,
exactly. Or even just FaceTiming them, or doing another video service. They just like to, because if I call the video relay service and there's an interpreter in the middle, they actually want to see me and talk to me. So then I'll just FaceTime them or video phone them a different way. Yeah, because they want to be connected to me, not a person in the middle. Yeah. And so I try to be able to FaceTime them as much as I can, or another video service.
Well, that makes sense. I've used, not on the podcast, but I have had several encounters where I have communicated with someone through the relay service, and that I have to do since I'm not going to see them sign. But I appreciate what you're saying, and it does add a little bit of a challenge to use the relay service, because you have somebody, although they're going to do it, I'm assuming, accurately, it still is a little different when you have a middle person that has to relay and translate both ways. Exactly. It's not as personal. And I think that they're very, things to them are very, they like to feel connected. And I think that that's just how they have always, that's how I've always been too. Like I still to this day can't talk to people and I'm hearing, to talk to people who have sunglasses on, because I can't see them. So I can't like feel their emotion or see like what they're. Do you think that technology like FaceTime and so on will eventually cause the relay system that we have today to go away, or do you think that won't happen?
I think that won't happen because you could be talking to somebody who doesn't know sign language. So I can FaceTime easily because I'm fluent in ASL. But if you call like a mortgage company, that person on that side doesn't know how to sign, so you
Right.
have to go through an interpreter.
Right. Yeah, that
Yeah.
makes sense. So the fact is that some of those technologies are going to continue to be around, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, exactly. And it helps. It makes everything more inclusive.
So, do you find that because of the empathy that you have, the understanding that you have, and kind of your upbringing overall, that makes you a somewhat unique and I would hope better realtor than a lot of other realtors in Colorado? Does that make you more successful, or how does
And
all that work?
it makes me more patient because real estate is a huge, like, it's one of their biggest things. So they're very stressed out. So I feel like I'm also like their therapist in a sense. So because I have compassion and patience, I think it makes them feel more trustworthy, more connected to me because I know how they're feeling, and I know like it's a biggest decision. I think growing up as a coda has taught me that communication is so much more than words. It's about like just being the energy and having like bridging the gaps between the two worlds. And I think that I carry that part of me on anything that I do, from working with the clients to speaking in public, because people don't always remember exactly what to say, but they always remember how you make them feel. And I feel like that's the lesson that my upbringing gave me. And I think that's what sets me a little bit apart.
Are you able to teach some of that to other realtors and would-be realtors in Colorado?
No, I should do that. I haven't, but I'm actually on the shy side. And so for me, like, cause a lot of people wants me to like put on classes, which I will someday, but I've always stuttered my entire life. So I was in speech therapy for stuttering. So I've always had been like self-conscious about that. So I think for me, if I was like talking in front of everybody, I'm pretty sure I'd be stuttering.
Nah. I am, I'm always amazed when I hear that that one of the top fears that people have is speaking in front of an audience. And the reason I have always been amazed at that is that I guess I realized early on, unless you're a real jerk, audiences want you to succeed and they're going to be supportive.
True. Oh, I like that. I never thought about it like that. That's actually really true.
They want you to succeed. Yeah. They want to learn from you. They want to interact with you in some way, and they want you to be successful. So I would think that, especially given the way you are and what you do, that it would be an ideal adjunct to what you do to start to teach that to other people. Much less as another income source, but that's another story.
Yeah, sure. And you're helping people. Like you're showing them how to be inclusive and how to be resilient towards stuff, which is so important to a lot of people, and it can change someone's mental health status right away.
Sure. If you would, give us a story from your real estate experience where your CODA environment and upbringing really made all the difference.
I'll
bet you have some.
I have a funny story about a house that so I had deaf clients, and we were walking in, and she was messing with the swamp cooler. And so she couldn't hear that something had gone on. And I was in a different room, so I didn't know that whole thing took place. And so the next day I went over there to do a walkthrough, and the entire basement ceiling was flooded because the swamp cooler had leaked, but she couldn't hear that it was actually like going off. And so I think that's like one of my like stories of like we would have been able to hear it, but we couldn't hear it, and so it like flooded the whole basement. She did still buy the house though.
Well, yeah, she felt guilty. Need to have
She did like that.
Need to have a light that when something goes on that you know it went on because the light turned on.
Yeah, exactly. When we were growing up, anytime the doorbell rang, or if like Rose was crying in her crib, we had the lights that would blink off and on.
Mm-hmm. Well,
and the phone too. I remember that.
And the phone, yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, it makes sense. I try to do pretty well at monitoring lights here in the house, so I know how switches go. The problem is that there are some sets of switches where there is a switch on one wall and another switch that controls the same lights on another wall, and if somebody else comes in and turns on a switch, then it can be a little bit confusing.
It can be a little, yeah, exactly.
And the dog and the cat don't help.
They're supposed to be.
Yeah, well, you tell them. They haven't listened to me yet, but no, it's. I can imagine that must have been a funny story. As you said, she bought the house. Well, maybe she was guilty, and maybe she just went, well, I broke it in.
Yeah, she's had to test the waters out, make sure the swamp cooler was working.
Yeah, well, that's it. She was just testing it out, and it passed.
Yep. Flying colors.
Yeah, really. So how can the lessons in your book help people in their own relationships in their own environment?
I have tips and things like that towards the back of every chapter, just to or tell you how to be more inclusive, and even some signs in there as well. And so I think that have more empathy towards people, and I just think that love is love, and I think that it's going to help people connect better with others, not just the deaf and hard of hearing, but I think that there's just one small act of kindness towards people can make a world of difference in their lives.
I hear you. Well, of course, I have to ask: is there an audio version of the book?
Yes, there is, and it's going to be released any day now. It's already uploaded and it's already complete. We're just waiting for Amazon and all the platforms to get them. And there's also going to be a sign language version of the book.
Okay.
After the audio. So the audio should be released within the next, probably a week.
Is that from Audible?
Yes. Okay. So I'm just waiting for them to upload it.
Yeah, well, there's always that.
I know. Yeah, because it's already been 20 days now, and I called them today, and they're going to call me tomorrow. I think there's something wrong with the title or something.
Who reads the book?
Her name is Chanel, and so I interviewed probably 4 different of them, and I loved her voice because I felt like she was more like me. She kind of had my tone. Mm-hmm. As well. So I'm so happy because it was already recorded. And then when I heard it, I was like, oh, that just it didn't feel like me. And then so this other one read it and I'm like, oh my God, okay, that's the one. So I'm really excited about it.
Well, when it comes out on Audible, if there's a way to get something we can put in the show notes about it, please do.
Oh yes, I will for sure. It will be, I'm assuming this week somehow it'll be on Amazon and all the other Audible platforms.
Great. That's pretty cool. Well, that's a good thing. Well, so you've written this book that teaches a lot. How do you think that will help other people in their own careers and relationships? To
maybe open their hearts and their eyes a little bit and just feel how people are feeling. So I'm hoping that it'll just bring more inclusiveness and more empathy towards other people. Cool.
If people want to reach out to you and ask questions or seek assistance or whatever, whether it's real estate or whatever, how do they do that?
I have a website at galluccihomes.com. And then
Gallucci is G-A-L-U.
Gallucci. 2 L's and 2 C's. And then homes with an S.com. And then the book, it has its own website. It's raisedinsilience.com. And it's on all book platforms right now. Okay. Cool. Well, I hope people will reach out. I think you've got not only a wonderful story, but a lot to teach people. And I'm anxious to hear when you start doing these classes. I know, exactly. I'll keep you updated.
Be brave. Yeah. Come on.
No, you taught me a really good thing about how, it's true. They're there for you. They want to learn from you. I love that. So I shouldn't be nervous. No, you really shouldn't be. The reality is audiences want people to succeed. Like I said, unless you're just a real jerk. Yeah. And you're not. I don't think I am, and you're not. So I think people will want you to do that, and they would endorse it. Yeah, thank you so much. That means a lot.
Well, I want to thank you for being here. We've been doing this for an hour already. Can you believe it?
I know that was fast. Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It was amazing.
Well, it was fun, and we can do it again if you want at some point. But I
Yeah,
really
that would be
appreciate you
great.
doing it. Well, thank you, and I want to thank all of you for being out there and being with us on the podcast. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please feel free to email me at michaelhi, michaelhi, at accessibe, accessibe.com. And wherever you are monitoring our podcast, please give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate those. But also, even more important than that, please give us a review. We want to hear your reviews. We appreciate your thoughts. And people who listen or watch these podcasts love to see in advance what people think of the podcast. So I hope that you'll like it and that you'll give us a great rating. If you know of anyone else who ought to be a guest, and that includes you, Maria, we really would appreciate you introducing us to anyone who you think ought to be a guest on Unstoppable Mindset. We value that a great deal, and we want everyone to be able to come on and tell their stories. So with all of that, I just want to tell you once again, Maria, this has been absolutely wonderful. I appreciate you being here, and thank you for your time and all that you shared with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for having me.
If you're ready to go deeper into the ideas that shape how we see ourselves and others, I have a free gift for you. Head over to michaelhingson.com and download my free ebook, Blinded by Fear. Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep choosing to live with an unstoppable mindset.